Welcome to the World Football Summit podcast, the show for football industry leaders who want to stay ahead of the game. We bring you the latest insights, trends, and stories from the experts driving innovation and progress in sports business worldwide. Join us as we dive deep into the ideas and initiatives transforming the world of football. From sustainability and innovation to player development, fan engagement, and everything in between. Our goal is to unite the global football industry and drive positive change and progress. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I'm your host, Jaime, CMO at World Football Summit. Today, we have a fun episode aligned for you as we welcome Kasper Kronenberg, Editor-in-Chief and co-founder at Off the Pitch, one of the best football business intelligence services and databases in the world. If you're into club valuations around the world, including Europe, the MLS, Saudi Arabia, women's football, and topics related to governments, this is an episode you do not want to miss. But that's not all. We also talk about the origins of the business, entrepreneurship, lessons Kasper has learned over the course of his career. This one has it all. Before we go into it though, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice and share it with your industry colleagues. You can also subscribe to our newsletter where every week we send updates, trends, and everything that goes on at our events. You can find the link in the show notes. And by the way, next year, it's going to be a busy one for World Football Summit as we have events in London, Mexico, Sevilla. You can check it all out on our website. Nothing else from my side. Now, enjoy this conversation with Kasper Kronenberg. Well, Kasper, we finally made this happen. I want to welcome you to the World Football Summit podcast. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since we met for World Football Summit Europe in Sevilla. So it's a great way to finish the year. So welcome.
Thanks so much, Jaime. Thanks a lot for having me.
I think people out there are going to know who you are. But just in case someone is a little bit distracted today, I was wondering if you could briefly introduce yourself and more importantly, can you tell us why is it that you do what you do?
Yeah, my name is Kasper Kronenberg. I'm the editor-in-chief at Off the Pitch. And why do we do what we do? Me and my co-founder, Mes, we started the company 5 years ago because we thought there were a scope for a business-oriented, specialized media in the football industry. We thought that there was a need for someone being non-biased, trying to stick to the facts. So we did this newsletter on a daily basis. And today, most of our business is actually from the business, or you could say the business intelligence tools that we're also providing. So I guess it's also a story about how it often goes. When you start a business, you start in one place, and then suddenly you're doing something a little bit different. But we still have the newsletters, and we like them very much.
Yeah, 5 years ago. And today you first financial and operational data, I would say, from I think it's 300 clubs, more or less, 80 leagues, 5,000 players. I mean, across 10 leagues. I mean, how has all this data gathering evolved over the years? I'm curious to know.
Yeah. Actually, to be frank, it was you could say it was a coincidence that we sort of turned this into a business. Because for a start, you know how it works when you're a reporter, you need to do your research, and we started to collect all these financial reports from various clubs, and so we would say we had to do that research anyways. What we found out when we approached clubs, leagues, other sources that we talked to, quite often they didn't have this overview. They were not sort of comparing themselves to other clubs. Are you being profitable? Are you having a decent growth? What about the debt levels? All sorts of things. And then we just found out, and it wasn't me, it was actually my co-founder, Mes, who did it. He said, well, maybe there's a business opportunity here because, I mean, we have the data anyways. We have collected it all. So maybe we should start to sell it to the customers. And we did that already 4.5 years ago. And now it's, by far our biggest revenue driver.
Oh, is it? Okay. I was going to ask you about that. I mean, out of the different data that you collect, which was one, maybe not in terms of revenue, but which one was the one that created more interest from people from the industry? So
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for a start, we were really focused on financial data. We sort of went through all the accounts, and that was sort of where it all started. That was where we came from. But actually, what we found out was the fact that you know how it works in football clubs. What are the key assets? It's the players. And we had sort of tried to stay away from that because we actually take the name off the pitch rather seriously. We do know that things on the pitch, it's important. You need to focus on results, on the players, how they perform, etc. But my point is there are so many other businesses within technical data. So we didn't sort of want to interfere with that. We don't think we can compete with that. But what we found out was the fact that, okay, where do clubs really make money? Where could we really make a difference? And that is when they do transfers and when you try to predict, okay, what's the value of X player? So that's where we can see, you could say the majority of growth today is that when clubs are going to do better preparations, when they're going to do transfer due diligence, obviously they need data. I mean, if you just call an agent or you call the you could say the guy you're going to talk to in the next club, you can do that, but you need to prepare yourself. You need to look into data, and that's what more and more clubs are doing.
we're going to talk about entrepreneurship later, but I mean, that's a first lesson for sport entrepreneurs there. No, you had a hypothesis, you didn't want to go into player data, then you go out there, you realize that your quote unquote target is interested in that data, and but you have to start developing it, right? So
exactly.
And in that sense, I mean, please share whatever you want to share because I'm curious now that we're talking about entrepreneurship. What has been key to acquire, let's say, new customers for the platform and maybe not only acquire them, but also retain them at the end of the day? But that's what guarantees growth.
Yeah, I'd say in terms of retaining the customers, and this shouldn't sort of sound like me bragging, but actually our churn rates are really low, so we don't have a big problem with that. I mean, in terms of the customers receiving the newsletters, the churn rates are really low, and the same with the data. But frankly, in the football business, you know how it is. It's a network business, so it's very important who you know. When we started this company 5 years ago, we didn't know anyone. We really started from scratch. We've been doing business journalism for many years. We had a great network in Denmark and the Nordic region. But when we came to London, I mean, we didn't know anyone. Rasmus Ankersen from at that time being with Brentford, he was really kind to meet us, and then we had a chat with him. But we had to do it all from scratch. And also, if you go to a club's website, you want to be in touch with someone, the CEO, the chairman of the board. There's not an email address, there's not a phone number, and these communications departments, they are they're not always really helpful. And I'm not saying this to be rude towards them, but they sort of protect the executives.
Yeah.
So to build that network, that was sort of the tough part. Yeah, now we've been in business for 5 years. We know quite a few people out there, so it's much more easy. But I mean, if we could have that network that we have now from day one, that would have been a real beauty.
Definitely. I always say that to the people who want to enter the industry at the end of the day. No, you have to build a strong network, but that takes time. At the end of the day, you have to be out there sharing content, being at events, just really putting yourself out there. But you can't expect magic results. No, it compounds over time, I would say.
It's a really good point, and exactly when you start a business, what you don't have, or I guess you do have it, but what you feel that you don't have is time. So you feel that every time you do something, when you attend in a conference, whatever it is, you feel that, okay, I need to build some business here. But if you do that too hard, if you push too hard, and that's all you want to do, you want to send out invoices. Don't do that. I mean, be polite, be gentle, take it easy. If you have a strong product, if you have a real interest in people, at some point you're going to do business with them. Obviously, if you have a great product, but don't push too hard because you need to be patient. So you're spot on.
I agree. I mean, it sounds cliche, but at the end of the day, you have to add value first before actually getting people to, buy your service. So,
Yeah, exactly.
and as we also have our newsletter. I'm going to ask a question that is, I admit, it's going to be only for my benefit probably, unless someone out there who's listening also has their own newsletter. Are there any tips you would share to grow a newsletter? Because your newsletters are fantastic, and I was just wondering.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think the key thing here would be to be consistent. I mean, you need to be stable. I mean, when you've told people they're going to send out a newsletter every morning at 7 a.m., you have to do it. I mean, I think maybe it sounds ridiculous. It sounds a little bit too easy, but quite often you see media. Some days they are really sending out all sorts of stories, doing a great coverage of things, but then along the way, they sort of lose sights of what they want to do. They lose sort of the enthusiasm. But if you are going to do something, you have that sort of promise to your readers. You're going to do it every day. You're going to give you that overview every morning. And I think the key thing would be to respect your readers' time. I mean, often reporters and journalists, they think that every people, they get up every morning to read newsletters, newspapers, watch television for 1 or 2 hours every day. But it doesn't work that way. They don't have time to do that. They are busy guys. They're busy men and women. They need to get an overview quickly. So if you can build a newsletter, people can get an overview and maybe a little bit of inspiration within 2-3 minutes, then you have accomplished a lot. But respect the time.
I like that. Respect the reader's time. That's such a simple advice, but it's hard to embrace, I guess, right? But it's a good one. Anyway, Kasper, there's so many things to talk about. I mean, the industry is just there's so many realities, dynamics going on that I thought it was a great opportunity to bring you on and touch upon different topics. First off, I mean, I think it was a few weeks ago that it was the UK government that announced that it was ready to approve the role of the famous independent regulator, right? So, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think it's going to accomplish its role of monitoring everything related to the profitability of English football?
I must say I'm a little bit skeptical, but as you said in the beginning, in this industry you really need to be patient. And I would say, in terms of the independent regulator in the UK, I think we actually wrote about this, if not the very first day when we sent out the first newsletter, then within a few months. I mean, they've been talking about this for so long. And I know it was sort of confirmed that it's going to happen in the King's speech. I think it was 1 month ago.
Yeah, more or less.
Still, we haven't had anyone appointed yet. The organization hasn't been built, so we are still waiting to see how is this going to play out. And I think another crucial point here, talking about this independent regulator. I mean, when you read about the things they want to do and the power that this regulator should have, it sounds great. However, in the UK, there's a big tendency that clubs, institutions, private people, they go to court all the time. So I have a feeling that often you're going to see the independent regulator demand something. They want to sort of set an example in all sorts of areas within club management and financial regulation. But I find it hard to see that clubs are going to accept the
Yeah.
decisions over and over again. So I think they're going to take the independent regulator to court again and again and again. So I think it's going to be some lengthy discussions, some lengthy processes, because that's how they do it in the UK. If you disagree about small things, you go to court, and it's going to take forever.
Yeah, probably. And I'm wondering, not too long ago also was this ruling with Everton, right? Getting the 10-point deduction. Do you think the role of an independent regulator would have helped avoid such an issue?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, because you could say when you read the King's speech and where they highlighted, okay, this is how we're going to do it. This is the whole purpose of this regulator. Then you would say, okay, if they really are going to give them real power, they can do things. Obviously, they would have told Everton 3, 4, 5 years ago, okay, guys, you need to stop spending so much money on transfers and on wages. So if they're going to get substantial power, yes, then it's going to work. But my point, like I said before, is that I have a feeling that when this independent regulators are going to tell X club that they're going to behave in a different way, in all sorts of areas, these clubs are going to say, no, 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 you can't do that. We're going to charge you on that decision. We're going to take it to court, and then the court system is going to work. So I, I find it hard to see that they're going to build, you could say, a very efficient organization that can handle these things. But hopefully, my skepticism will be proved wrong.
Yeah. No, but I know what you mean. I don't think it's just a matter of, okay, let's put someone in there and everybody's going to comply and be fine with it, right? There's going to be some challenges. And one of the issues here or one of the critiques against football clubs has been their lack of transparency, with everything that has to do with the results. But I'm wondering, is there any league property, doesn't have to be in England in general, that you think is a good example of being transparent and responsible with its accounts?
In terms of the accounts, actually, that now we are talking about the UK market or the English clubs. Their financial reports, they are very thorough. I mean, you can easily get the accounts, and when you read them through, you can really see, okay, where do they make money? How much is match day revenue? How much is merchandising? How much is TV money, etc. So these accounts are really good. You start to get problems. For instance, in Germany, some of the accounts are pretty solid and they are transparent, but often you won't find many details about how they run their business. So I would say the UK it's great. The Germany not so great, and many smaller leagues it's almost impossible.
I guess because the reason there could be that the pressure to deliver results on the pitch kind of like leads you to making poor decisions off it, and then you realize you made a poor decision. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm not going to be transparent about this. But in your view, do you think this gap between what happens on the pitch and off the pitch can be reduced?
Actually, I think we are seeing a very positive change in that sense. I understand your question because, quite often we see poor management decisions. We do see some very poor accounts. Actually, today we published an analysis. I think we've seen around 40 financial accounts from the 2022-2023 season. They've been published, and we took a look at these accounts and saying, okay, what are the trends? Are clubs in a better place in terms of profitability, growth, wages to revenue, and the clear overall picture where the clubs are improving things. Still, you have the problem that when you have revenue growth of, I think it was 9 or 10% on average, then in the past, you saw the wages, they grew even faster. Obviously, that's not too great, but actually, we saw wages to revenue ratios improve. So things are going in the right direction. I guess it's a big question because why is this happening? I think the key reason is the change of ownership you see around Europe. That's one thing. The other thing is that you see, you could say that the quality of the management teams running clubs around Europe are simply better. People are better educated. They know that they need to run a football club like you run every other business.
Yeah.
20 years ago, 30 years ago, you just hired the right winger, the former captain, or something like that, and they might be able to do a great job. But today, the businesses are much more complex, so you need proper education and proper knowledge.
Yeah, I think there is a trend towards becoming more professional, and it's something that we also believe in our World Football Summit, right? That we need to we need clubs to start embracing more professionalization, more commitment to being financially sustainable at the end of the day. And speaking about ownership, Kasper, I wanted to ask you this, and I think it's a good segue because at last year we ran a survey at World Football Summit about multi-club ownership. And that was defined by many professionals who participated in the survey as kind of like the optimal ownership model. And today, you see it all over the place pretty much, and you see rumors of even seeing more in the near future. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, like yourself and like everyone else, I see this development as well, and it's actually a big number now that when you see how many clubs are part of a multi-club ownership. Obviously, it depends on the definition, but and I really don't want to sound too skeptical about many things, but I am a little bit skeptical about this model because, frankly, I don't think we've seen sort of too many great examples of multi-club ownerships playing out too great. I mean, you could always say, okay, City Football Group, they are doing a fairly good job. Yes, they are well-run club. They've won, I don't know, incredibly amount of titles the last couple of years. But uh, diving into that, I mean, what about all the other clubs in their multi-club ownership? How are they doing? I know Girona right now are doing really good in
Yeah.
Spain, so that's also a good example. And maybe this is actually what it's all about. Maybe I need to be a little bit more patient and wait. Let's wait out to have a strong opinion on these types of ownership, and let's wait and see 3, 4, 5 years how it's all going to play out. But for now, what I've seen, I'm not impressed with how these clubs are being run. And I'm not just talking about whether these clubs are winning things, whether some of them they might be relegated. It's okay, but on the business side of things, are they building a solid business? Do we see revenues growing? Solid ratios on turnover and wages, and I haven't really seen that yet. So I'm a little bit skeptical. But let's see in 3, 4 years time whether they can do it.
But I understand. I mean, that you're being skeptical because I would say that a lot of people say, "What?" I mean, the goal of an investor really maybe it's not so much making it a mm, sustainable club in the long term, rather making a profit so they can then later sell it again. So I guess this begs the question: do you believe that any form of institutional investor is good for the sport? Again, because it seems they want more to maximize return on their investment rather than making the club sustainable in the long run.
Yeah, I see your point, but in that sense, I must say I do believe it's a positive trend that we see institutional money coming into football. I do believe that when you have a business mindset, when you look at the entity you've bought as a business like all others, then you are going to improve that club. And by improving the finances, you're also going to improve the sporting results. So I don't sort of share that skepticism that if you have a institutional investor coming in, it could be a private equity fund, then they're going to sort of strip this club from everything, change everything. The fans are going to be against it, and then when they're going to sell it, there's nothing left because that's what's all about. If they don't manage to sell the club to a higher price, then they haven't created any value. Because
Yeah.
we need to remember that in football, there are hardly any clubs paying dividends. Yes, you've seen it in Manchester United, but I mean, I can't mention too many other clubs doing that. So they really need to build something sustainable in the long term in order to get the return back. And that's where I can be a little bit skeptical whether you could say the money being paid for clubs now, what could you call it? Premium prices. I mean, these prices are rather hefty. So can they get their money back, or can they get a decent return on these investments? I'm a little bit more skeptical on that. But the fact that these money coming in, I think it's going to make a positive impact in football.
Could be. I was having a similar conversation with Onmish on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and basically what he was saying, he made a good point. At the end of the day, these are businesses, and what does a business do? It creates value, but then it needs to capture value. And I think the role of an investor here is going to help not only put financial resources, but then help these clubs embrace that, right? So your business, you have to create value for all your stakeholders, but then also capture it so you can grow sustainably, right?
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
And in that sense, another topic that I wanted to discuss, is about club valuations, because you guys do an awesome job looking at how much these clubs are rising in valuation, and you have seen all over the place, really all over the world, how these have risen dramatically. And it's basically because of the increase, I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the expert here, but it seems it's because of the higher multiples, right, that are being delivered. Um, so I'm wondering, well, is that true? And second, is this a sustainable trend? Is this going to keep over time, or are we at risk of seeing that stop at some point?
Yeah, obviously, it depends what club we're looking at, because there are some, I guess there are some really good buys out there where you could say, for instance, Newcastle. I guess you could say that the price they paid for that asset, I think it was a very good price, and I think
Yeah.
that if they are going to at some point sell their shares to that club and they're going to have a new ownership, I have a feeling that they're going to have a really solid return. But then there are other clubs where you could be more skeptical, because obviously every time there's being paid these premium prices, it's because there are predictions that, okay, in the future, revenues are going to grow. And especially people have a tendency to think, okay, the broadcasting numbers, they're going to continue to rise. We're going to see clubs making much more revenues on digitalization. I mean,
Yeah.
selling all sorts of digital products to fans. And it might happen. It might turn out that this is a really profitable area. This is undiscovered territory, and that these new investors, they can actually help executives to build, you could say, a fourth or a fifth revenue pillar. But I must say, I'm a little bit skeptical about that. So I think overall, the premium prices we are seeing being paid, I'm skeptical that when you see the next wave of ownership changes in 4, 5, 6 years' time, I'm convinced that quite a few of these investors, they're going to lose money. And they should be happy if they get all their money back. They're not going to
Yeah.
make great returns.
They're just things that are, at least they make you wonder. So, for example, you mentioned Newcastle. I think it was valued. Well, you probably know this better than me, but I think it was somewhere between, it was either 400 million or 600 million or something like that. But then you look at a club like LAFC from the MLS, and nothing, and no critic there, obviously, because it's a good business. I think it was valued at 1 billion. But when you compare the legacy of the clubs and the competitions they're being playing, I mean, at least it makes you wonder. It's just that,
Yeah,
not a critic there. So,
yeah, I totally get it, and you could say, look at these numbers, it doesn't really make much sense. But I think, I mean, when you look at this, I think it's important to look at, okay, there's such a big difference between English football and English football culture and history and the
mm,
things we see in the US. Because in the US, why were these clubs invented? I mean, how did they all start? There's a reason why they call it franchises. I mean,
yeah,
they are businesses. They are built like businesses. So I know what you mean, Jaime. When you look at these numbers, you say, okay, how are they ever going to get a return on this investment when revenues are so, relatively speaking, low?
mm,
But on the other hand, I'd say, okay, but this club and this league and everything they do all over the states, they want to build businesses. They want to grow
yeah,
things. So you could say they're all in the same boat. They are aligned. We need to keep the league growing, and I think that's really important. And if you go to the UK, you have all sorts of ownership types.
yeah,
I know you could say, okay, but UEFA, they want them all to be financially sustainable. So at some point they need to make money, but there's just a culture within American clubs that we need to grow. We need to make money. They are not ashamed to talk about profits. They're not ashamed
yeah.
to talk about dividends. They eat it for breakfast. They talk about it all the time. So there's just a culture of moving things forward. And obviously, they like football. They like the game as
Yeah.
well. But there's a big difference to Europe. So I just have a feeling that they're going to succeed somehow to get a return, even though the prices look really high.
But that's a good point. They're aligned, and they have a very clear vision in the United States about what the goal is, which is actually growing the league versus just going one team here or there. And a good example of that is when Inter Miami was rumored to be acquiring Messi. I think there was a conversation there around the calendar and say, okay, we don't know if this is going to happen, but if it does happen, probably they knew much more than you and I, right? But they said, okay, let's shift the calendar in a way that Messi that Inter Miami plays the second half of the season in major markets like New York, like Los Angeles. You know what I mean? So if that eventually ends up happening, which it did, we're going to make sure that Messi visits the bigger markets. So
Yeah,
that's a good example.
yeah, exactly. Right. But that's a good example of how they do it. That's how they think. Okay, they've probably paid premium money. I don't know the paycheck of Messi in Miami, but it's quite a bit. So, but instantly, and at the very first meeting, they start to discuss. Okay, how are we going to make money on this? What can we do? And you've seen many sports franchises just moving to another city. They don't care about that. So they are less. Would say they have much more flexibility to do things within each club and also the clubs together because they have the same goal.
Yeah, agreed. And then another key thing there is there's no relegation, as everybody knows, right? And when
Yeah.
you look, for example, at what happened with the 49ers acquiring Leeds, I believe there was a big discount in the valuation of Leeds just because they were relegated. I think it was about $400 million, I think it was. In any case, regardless of the number, do you think the fact that that there's a relegation system in place or not is enough to justify those differences in valuation?
I think specifically talking about the Leeds United takeover, and if I don't know whether these numbers have been confirmed anywhere that there was such a huge discount.
Hmm.
I agree with you. If the discount was 400 million just because they were relegated, it's a really really big discount, and it doesn't really, at least from the seller's point of view, it doesn't really make sense. On the other hand, maybe as I understood it, the seller he really wanted to get out, so he was. I
Yeah,
don't know whether he was forced to sell, but sometimes deals do take place due to reasons that we don't really understand. I would say that if it was another English side, smaller team. I mean, Leeds is a big club. It's a big city. They have massive support. So I would say you could argue that they are probably going to go back to the Premiership within 1, 2, 3 years' time. And then that discount doesn't make sense. If it was a smaller club, it could be Huddersfield. Then you could say, okay, you've just lost your Premier League status. Are you going
yeah,
to be promoted again? Well, we're not really certain. The price needs to go down.
yeah, I agree. It depends on the context of each club, right? Um,
Yeah.
and what about women's football, Casper? I mean, you see evaluations there, especially when you look at the NWSL, no? I think average valuation is like 66 million. Um, but just a couple of years ago, not too long ago, Angel City or San Diego, they paid, I think it was expansion fees of somewhere between 2 to 5 million, right? So the difference is huge. Um, do you think that is sustainable? Is it going to keep increasing even more?
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think it's going to increase. I was so lucky to meet one of the club owners or one of the club executives at your event in Seville
Yep.
earlier this year that you hosted, and she told me about the way they work, and I mean, I must say I was really impressed. I haven't been at the stadium, I haven't watched women's football in the US, but in terms of having a business mindset, in terms of really always sort of pushing the organization, always delivering growth. I mean, there was just such a big difference talking to her and talking to, you could say, European executives, because often they talk about football a lot. They really like the game, they really like football. And I'm not saying that the CEO from Angel City that she doesn't like football. I'm certain that she loves football, but at the first thing she's thinking about every morning is how do you grow this business. So I must say I'm really impressed with the things they do in the US. And I think another point here would be that why do they make why do they create so much value? Because
Mhm.
these entities are like startups. I mean, they have investors behind them, and they need to fight to survive, and they need to fight to create a solid return. In the UK and in most other countries in Europe, we all know how it works. They are part of an organization that
Yeah.
is already there, so they are always fighting for budgets. In Manchester United, even though their playing budget for the women's team is big, but you also know how it works when the board is meeting. Okay, how much money we're going to spend on the men's team and on the women's team. There's always this battle for resources, and they are not simply not being shown enough interest and enough money to grow it. So I think you could see the same growth rates in Europe if these entities, if these businesses were sort of taken away from the mothership
Yeah.
and we run like independent businesses. Then you could see something. We've just seen it with this American owner who bought a team in the London. I think it was a couple of days ago. I think you should pay close attention to that team because I think they're going to do something great because that's her only focus. She doesn't care
Yeah.
about the men's team. She wants that team to perform and grow, and I think she's going to do it.
Yeah, but to your point, I think it's not the same when you do a spin-off of a club, which is what they do in Europe, versus building your own club. And when you look at Angel City, they have very clear ideas, and which is why they're doing well. They focus on the business. They focus on their purpose, their community. I mean, they have very clear, the performance side, of course, is there. But there's just they're built them being more than a club or being a brand play, if you will, of I just need to have a women's football team and I just put some resources just to see how that goes, right? There's a lot more.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now let's travel to Saudi Arabia. Let's start to the other side of the world, because I mean, no one can hide from the fact that they're investing so much in developing football there in the region, right? So when you look at the current market value of the Saudi Pro League, I think it's around 800 million, or at least that was the number like a few months ago. But they want to increase this to 2.1 billion by 2030, right? And they want to increase commercial revenue from like 120 million to 400 million by the same time, right? Do you think this is a realistic goal or goals to have?
Yeah. Actually, I think it is, and I do understand that some people might be a little bit skeptical whether they can actually do it, and whether they're ever going to succeed building a profitable league or a financially sustainable league. It might take a while to do it. Obviously, they have a lot of work to do. I was so lucky to visit the Saudi Pro League a few weeks ago in Riyadh. I must just say, when talking to them, hearing about the visions for the game and how they want to build it, I'm just convinced that they are going to continue to invest massively, and they're not going to continue to invest and lose money. Obviously, yes, they are losing a lot of money now and probably the next, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 years, but they want to build a league because this is about much more than just football. This is about the diversification of the economy, which is essential for that country. So they need to stick to the plan. And also, this is about building you could say a great country where the young population can do great things. So they need this league. This is not like what we saw in China. It was something completely different. I believe they're going to do a good job, and eventually they're going to be profitable. But it's going to take some time.
I agree. We were just there for World Football Summit Asia in Jeddah, and that's what you would notice right out of the gate. Their commitment to make this sustainable, to actually develop this as a key priority of the country. It was just amazing, right? So I think, yes, it is going to take time, but they will eventually get there. You don't know if they're going to become a top 1, top 2 league, but they will get very high up in terms of valuation, performance. I'm pretty sure of it, right?
Yeah, and I think you have a really good point, Jaime, that exactly that their commitment to build a sustainable league, that's what it's all about. That's the end goal. And many of us in Europe, when we look at this league, we have sort of the feeling, they're just spending a lot of money. They're sort of bragging with all the big stars they're signing. And they are doing this for a business purpose. The long-term vision is to build something sustainable. And I think we really need to remember that before we sort of try to tell them that this is insane. I don't think it is.
No, and it's not only off the pitch, but when you talk to them, I mean, one of the things they were saying is it doesn't really make sense to bring Cristiano Ronaldo if the local player is not going to learn how to train from him, if he's not going to learn from him how to become a professional. So once you start develop the quality on the field, everything else is going to trickle down, right? You're going to get more fans into the game. You're going to get more commercial revenue, sponsors, all of that. It's just the flight is going to start turning, right? Kasper, I could have you here all day asking questions about the industry, but I mean, I don't want to. I want to be respectful of your time. I just want to have a final segment about your career and lessons that you would share with sport industry professionals. And I guess I want to start by asking, I guess, what is the moment that you're most proud of during these 5 years that of the pitch has been providing value to the industry?
Well, I'd say probably the most proud moment would be when we started. I mean, just doing it. The fact that the mess myself, we sort of skipped our good jobs. With another big media in Denmark. I mean, I've been having this dream for I don't know 20 years. I've been working on so many business plans, having all these ideas, but I never had the courage to do it. I just talked about it. I never had the guts to do it. So finally, after I turned 40, I did it. I mean, that made me proud. Obviously, it's hard, and then some days you might ask yourself, why did I do this? But at the end of the day, I love it, and it actually makes me proud that I finally did it.
Would that be the main advice you would give any aspiring sport entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it takes more than courage because once you do it, I remember with our two, we have two investors in the company, Morten and Søren, and they told us one of the first meetings, they said, "Okay, guys, you need to realize that once you have your own business, it's time consuming. It's going to sort of influence all aspects of your life." And I remember I thought, yeah, okay, I know what it means to work hard. I know what it means to be sort of married to a job and to really care about your job. But it is something different. I think you need to understand that being an entrepreneur, having your own business, it just eats you. I mean, it's really, but it's also really, really great. So I'm not complaining about that. I guess the key advice would be to be patient. Things takes time. No, we read about all these companies that are seeing this amazing growth, and within 5 years' time, they're unicorns. That's super great. I wish I could do it, but I mean, if you are patient, you can definitely build a business. But at the same time, don't be too stubborn. You need to make changes. I mean, don't fall too much in love with your original idea and your product, because if the market are looking for something else, you need to adjust things, and we did that.
Yeah, that's good advice. I mean, it kind of reminds me of some advice that other leaders in the podcast have shared, which is actually you have to enjoy that's the journey. That's the reward, not only it's not about the destination.
Yeah, good point.
Um, and Casper, I mean, I think you're a very good person to ask this question. As you know, um, before World Football Summit Europe, we launched a rebrand, and the essence of that rebrand is that we need a better football industry, meaning we need a football industry that embraces innovation, that commits to excellence, that aspires to become sustainable across its three pillars, financial, environmental, social. If I were to ask you, how would you define the football industry that you want or that you need in 1, 2 sentences? How would you do it?
I'd say that we need a football industry that is financially sustainable, and we need a football industry which is much more transparent about what they do and what they want to do. Yeah.
Good one. Transparency. I like that. Um, and also, just a different type of question that I have for you just to finish. You're a big fan of golf, as I understand it. So I was wondering if you could play a round of golf with any player in history, who would you choose and why?
Yeah, that's a tricky one because I guess honestly the only professional football player that I've heard of, which is really good at golf, and I'm not good at golf myself, but that is Gareth Bale, and then obviously it would be great to play a round of golf with him since he used to be a Spurs player. I'm a Spurs fan, so it would be great I've seen his swing on YouTube. Wow, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, it would be fun. They do say, I mean, I know people who played with him and they say that he's a very good player. Well, actually, look at him. He's starting to compete, right? So good choice.
Yeah.
Casper, I want to thank you. This has been so much fun. But I don't want to let you go without, asking you about any last words that you want to share with the audience. Where can people learn more about you, about Off the Pitch? The floor is yours.
Oh, thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks a lot for your time, Jaime, and thanks a lot for the invite. I mean, if people want to learn more about our business, it's offthepitch.com. Hopefully, they can read about who we are and what we do. But thanks a lot for inviting. It was a pleasure.
And no need to thank me, Kasper. Actually, this is an open invitation. You can join us anytime to provide a review of the industry, and we'll always be super happy to welcome you back. And thank you so much. Have a great day, Kasper, and thank you so much for your time.
Likewise. Thanks a lot.
And there you have him, Kasper from Off the Pitch. Boy, that was a fun one, at least for me. I hope you enjoyed it too. There were so many interesting takeaways. Let's see if we can summarize them quickly. All right. At the end of the day, when you look at the different regions of the world in terms of their valuations, first off, if we start with Europe, it's encouraging to see that there's a journey towards becoming more professional. And what he mentioned there, that the wages to revenue ratios are improving. So it's positive. There's still a long way to go, but it seems the trend is positive. No, so that's good to see. Probably this says well with the second takeaway, which is that it would be good to focus on what clubs and franchises in the United States are doing, which is basically think about the sport business as what it is, business. As I said in the conversation, we talked about this with Onmish. A business has to create value and then capture value and focus on growing sustainably, right? And that's what they do in the United States. They know how to run the business. Yes, it's sport, but they always focus on profitability and being sustainable in the long run. And then it was interesting to see how his thoughts about women's football, about how it's critical that women's football teams, it's better if they, let's say, start on their own and they're kind of independent. They're not being treated as a spin-off from the men's football clubs. And it's something that we also discussed with Ariana Cristiani back in the day. So that's a lesson worth considering. And also what we discussed about Saudi. And we were there at World Football Summit Asia speaking about this. The commitment that you see behind all of the institution, the entire ecosystem to actually make the Saudi Arabian Football League and just develop and be sustainable and create business opportunity, it's remarkable, right? And that's something that when you compare with other markets like China, you didn't see it as much, right? So interesting takeaway. And finally, the football he wants, I mean, couldn't be any other way, right? More transparent and focus on being financially sustainable, right? Anyway, guys, I don't know what you think. Let us know if you have different takeaways. If so, share it on social media, reach out to us. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, rate the podcast on the platform of choice. It's a great help for us. And share it with anybody that you feel can get value out of this conversation. I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I definitely had a lot of fun, and I really hope we can bring Kasper back one day. Let me know if you want to see that happen. And have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you next time.